Can you start a podcast with me, please? I need something to do.
Sent it out in front of Malkin to save. They score! Elias Lindholm looks to the heavens.
Here's a chance. Potter right in on goal. He scores. Oh my! What a move by the rookie.
2-on-1. Pasternak moving in with Marchand. Get it to it. Score!
The zone. Coyle dances in. Backhand. Score!
Lindholm right wing corner. Pasternak is there. He scores! David Pasternak wins it for Boston.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. I will be your host today. I am Maria from Watertown. I am joined, as always, by my steadfast and reliable co-host, Caroline with a K. How are you today, my friend?
I'm good. Happy recording Monday.
Yeah, we've been able to enjoy some downtime ourselves while the hockey world is on a little bit of a hiatus as well. Today, we're going to continue with what we have somewhat become a little bit of a tradition for us in doing some player profiles. And today, we're going to focus on Connor Clifton, who returns to Boston. Cliffy hockey is back. In what way, shape, or form that translates, we'll find out soon. But he comes back on a relatively team-friendly deal, familiarity with the organization. Just by way of a refresher, Connor is 31 years old, and he signed a 2-year, $4.5 million contract with the Bruins with a $2.2 million annual cap hit. We all know that from his prior experience here in Boston, that he does play with a high degree of energy, sometimes a little frenetic, but probably had his best year with the Bruins in 2022-2023, which ultimately led to Connor basically pricing himself out of Boston as a free agent, and was one of those things everybody knew it was coming, and everyone was like, hey, go out and get your bag of cash. And he did with the Buffalo Sabres, but the results never really translated with the Sabres. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that was a pretty bad Buffalo Sabres team at that time, both offensively, defensively, all the way around. I don't think you can say too much or levy too much criticism at any players on that Buffalo Sabres team at the time, but he does come back to Boston. He is a right-hand shot defenseman, and much has been made about the fact that the Bruins don't have enough depth with right-handed shot defensemen. I'm not sure this is the upgrade, honestly, that one was looking for. I think part of this signing is a little bit of a stopgap because the Bruins are going to start the season, the first 7 games, without Charlie McAvoy. Not that I'm saying, I'm not comparing the two.
No, but that's a big gap, regardless of the type of defenseman, any of them. Like all of the defensemen on the roster are going to be picking up extra slack, and you need to have, we don't have enough right-handed defensemen, period. And then you got to bring in somebody who is a little bit more experienced, who played with some of the guys currently on the roster.
And just as a reminder, Connor Clifton was part of that 2019 year and making it to the Stanley Cup Finals and the Cup run. He did get a decent amount of ice time during that year. Yeah.
He's played with Sean Corrali in Boston. He played with Pasta. He played with Chucky. I think that's everybody that he played with.
Zaka on that roster?
No.
Can't even remember that far back. Krejci was there. No.
Yeah. I think that he is probably a little bit of a stopgap, at least in that regard, some insurance at the start of the season, especially because of Chucky being also a right-handed D and there being a lack of them to begin with. For folks who maybe aren't familiar, who don't necessarily remember, there's the concept of Cliffy hockey that initially was a joking term, meaning, it's chaotic and he's a little out of control and he's just out there being crazy. And that sort of changed for him as a defenseman, as a player under Jim Montgomery. And if I'm recalling correctly, at one point, Jim Montgomery had said, yeah, we don't use that phrase anymore. But when he's at his best, being very physical and dominant out on the ice, I think you can still affectionately call that Cliffy hockey, because I think he has a very distinct playing style. When he has a very specific role, he does incredibly well. My impression, and I don't know if you had also kind of had this impression, when he left Boston, he seemingly fell a little bit by the wayside, maybe was underperforming, or I'm going to use this phrase very loosely, quote unquote, getting worse as a player. And I certainly went into my research on this episode with that mindset.
Yeah.
But I have to say, and hopefully this is going to be a little bit reassuring for you, Maria, especially, he actually is in great shape. He left Boston to go to a Buffalo team that at the time was still very much so actively dying under the leadership of Kevyn Adams. Remember, their Cinderella transformation literally only happened about, a quarter of the way into last season? So keep that in mind. And so going out there and knowing the type of defenseman that he is, he didn't really receive a ton of guidance. And when you're that type of defenseman and you're not really being given a good structured role, and you're in an organization that is constantly losing, Buffalo is a massive hockey town. They love the Sabres through the good times and the bad. And so there is a lot of pressure to perform well for fans that truly love the franchise. And Buffalo was also, and still is, in arguably the most competitive division in the entire league. It can be easy to look at him, look at his situation, and interpret a decline. But in reality, he's remained remarkably stable over the last couple of seasons. First of all, you cannot deny the positive impact of a player coming, quote unquote, home, right? He still has maintained an apartment in Boston all these years. So who was renting his apartment? Was Fraser Minton renting Cliffy's apartment? One of the young guys was actually living in his house.
Right. So he has no place to live right now. I'm sure he's found something, but
yeah, having a player come home is going to bring that positive mental attitude and approach to his game right off the bat, which is going to be great. I think we saw that to some degree with Sean Corrali. The other thing that I think is going to go in Cliffy's favor is his style of play is probably a better fit with the coaching style of Marco Sturm, even more so than when he was in Buffalo when he first started out there. And again, it has less to do with overall talent and more about that role clarity. We've talked about that hundreds of times on this podcast, where if a player doesn't have a specific role or a job, then he becomes a jag.
yeah.
And for a team to be successful, you look at every team that goes on a deep cup run, those teams that actually win the Stanley Cup, every single player has a clear role and responsibility and somebody else who can easily transition to fill some of those responsibilities when necessary. Connor Clifton, he's the type of player who has to exist for a reason. You have to ask, what is the hockey problem that he is solving? He is an incredibly physical right shot defenseman. He closes gaps very quickly. He wins battles and he ends D-zone possessions. So imagine him with someone like Jonathan Aspero, like we talked about in last week, where Aspero is very effective at ending defensive zone time, and partner him with somebody like Connor Clifton, and Cliffy is going to then lay out some pretty massive hits at the same time. So I find that very exciting.
I'm looking forward to the depth that he brings.
Yes.
Right? It's still a little, to me, the signing itself is a little, okay, does that speak to what was available in the market and the fact that you needed something to potentially bridge the gap of not having Charlie McAvoy in your lineup for the first 7 games of the season.
Yeah.
I do recall saying to myself, those of us who are fans of the Bruins, knowing that his final season in Boston was likely his best career year. So that was the 2022-23 season where he played 78 games, 5 goals, 18 assists, 23 points, and he was a plus 20.
Yeah.
16 minutes and penalties, which honestly, not too shabby given the physical level of play, which means to me, he knows how to deliver a hit and do it within the parameters of what's allowed.
Yeah.
Right? Little bit older now. Those statistics haven't continued to translate throughout his career or his time with Buffalo, and then a very short period of time with the Pittsburgh Penguins last season.
True. I did also take a look at some more defensive significant stats. And yes, he played a lot less in Pittsburgh. One of the better ways that you can really evaluate his performance over the last 3 years away from Boston is looking at the per 60 rate of everything that he's done. And when you're talking about a defenseman, you really want to look at what is his expected goals against per 60, goals against being how many goals are going to be scored against him, scoring chances against him, high danger chances against, and high danger goals allowed. These are all things that a good defenseman is going to try to minimize. And I will own it. I was pleasantly surprised to see that across all of those kind of key defensive metrics, he's been improving, even if he's playing less ice time in those areas. To me, that means perhaps he has matured as a defenseman, that his focus has become much more clearly defensively minded. And I think he can bring to the table that plus that physicality. It's going to be huge.
And he's reliable, right? You know what you're going to get pretty much shift after shift when he takes the ice. I do recall at that time saying to myself, it's unfortunate that he's going to price himself out of Boston. Because let's face it, every team needs a Connor Clifton type guy on the back end. Someone that you know you can pretty much throw out there in a variety of scenarios, maybe not on the power play, and you pretty much know what you're going to get from him.
And I don't think anybody wants to see any player for that matter, but especially a defenseman being the type that has to chase plays. And he is an aggressive defenseman. And if you look at him playing that way, that's partly where the Cliffy hockey idea came from, is that chaos comes from his willingness to be aggressive. And he was even more successful in Boston because this has always been a franchise that really emphasizes strong defensive structure. And then during his tenure in particular, starting under Bruce Cassidy and Jim Montgomery, those were well-oiled machines in terms of defense, and having a kind of a backup, a safety net that would allow an aggressive defenseman to take those chances, whether it was to go and finish a really aggressive hit or take a risk. He was able to be successful because of the system in place around him. And without that kind of system and structure in Buffalo, that can really leave somebody exposed and can make mistakes happen. And so when you think about now the type of coach that Marco Sturm is, where he is expecting a lot of simple play, details, structure, he's not going to be, he doesn't give any of the players free reign to go out and play willy-nilly however they want. Whether it's David Pastrnak or Mason Lohrei, everyone has a job. He has a specific expectation for every single person. And I think we could see potentially a resurgence in some of that well-known Cliffy hockey in the positive way because of the environment that Sturm has created. He will have some of that safety net. Now, we're not there yet by any means.
This is all speculation on our part because there's no denying, for whatever reason, that his level of play has declined a little bit. And to your point, a lot of that could be due to the fact of the teams that he's played on, right? The personnel that were already there, the type of system, the type of role. I think what happened to him in Buffalo was that there were high expectations, and the threshold for him was set at such a level that you would say, good luck there. They may want you to be the big dog there, but I don't know how that's going to translate for you. And I'm not sure that it did translate for him in the manner in which he might have expected it, and the Sabres organization might have expected it to translate.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other part of his game, besides that physicality and that good, solid defensive ability, as I mentioned, his ability to keep the goals against, scoring chances, all of those things low, which is obviously ideal. Some of his less great abilities in terms of exiting with possession and puck retrieval, those were not so awesome. Although, again, when he was in Boston,
I
he
do
was
remember
young.
he had some good speed.
But he has actually improved over the last 3 years with his exiting with possession. And honestly, he hasn't completely collapsed when it comes to his puck retrieval. I don't think he's gotten objectively worse in that regard. I think sometimes that's the bare minimum. And if that's not what is ultimately part of his job, imagining him partnered up with Jonathan Aspero, Aspie is one who is going to be more likely to be better at the puck retrieval and the exits, right? While he's supporting him in that role and he's doing something slightly different as Aspero's partner.
I'm going to find that very curious to see how this all plays out, because whatever happens in the first 7 games, right, of the season without Charlie Mack in the lineup I'm not quite sure that's what we're going to see throughout the course of the season. I do think he fits the bill of what Cam Neely said of wanting the Bruins to be tougher to play against. And I still think Connor Clifton can bring some of that to the table, because he's not afraid to hit.
Yeah. And what I find fascinating as I was thinking about it, he's not dissimilar in terms of his style of play and some of his defensive abilities compared to Andrew Peeke in terms of the good stuff. The value wasn't coming from offense. He's not like Mason Lohrei or even Hampus in solid two-way play. It's really in keeping things calm in the back end, winning those battles and killing plays. And you can't judge him and his abilities as a defenseman by what we see from players like Charlie McAvoy, right? Because he plays most successfully in a very particular structured role. And I'm feeling optimistic that, especially because he did not have that kind of structure around him, he did not have that kind of role assignment in Buffalo and in Pittsburgh, he just was never going to be able to perform as well as he had in his final season in Boston, because he was already then a little bit behind the 8 ball.
So your point there, do you find it odd that Andrew Peeke, we were fine with him moving on, right? But now we're comparing a little bit the type of play. So Andrew Peeke goes off to Utah at a $1 million cap hit for 1 year, but we've picked up Connor Clifton for a little bit longer, for a little bit more money. What is the turning point there? What is the Bruins' rationale, do you think, for that? I mean, I'm fine with it. And I was fine with saying goodbye to Andrew Peeke, because there were definitely some shortcomings that we saw defensively with Andrew Peeke, especially when things became a little bit frantic or chaotic in our own end.
Yeah. I think there are a couple of things in Connor's favor. I don't know that they're necessarily worth more financially compared to the 1 million and then the 2 whatever, but I think it's a couple of things that he is older. As a defenseman, you mature later. You want to have somebody in your back end who can reliably kill those plays, assist with getting the puck out of the zone. That's a hallmark of Sturm's system, is get it out fast because we want to play a high transition game. I think that he can help facilitate that transition game from the back end. So his decision making, I think, is probably better than Andrew Peak's, not just because of the age difference and that Connor Clifton has grown up a little bit more since he was last in Boston, and Andrew Peak being 28 and he's 31. And I think he's a known entity that they know very well. They know, is he coachable? How can he play for different kinds of coaches? He was in Boston for 2 different coaches. He's gone and seen some of the others. And this is me entirely speculating, but when you've been around the block and you've worked professionally, like, I'm going to just speak from my own experience. I know what's important. I know what's not important at this point in my career. I know what a good boss looks like and a bad boss looks like. I know how to work with different kinds of people. And you probably wanted to come home. And so you already then have somebody who has some degree of buy-in to the system. He knows what a good structured defensive system looks like and how he can help. That just makes it one less thing potentially that Bruins management has to worry about in the back end, whether it's the first 10 games of the season or it's March and people are getting squirrely. That's my impression.
Let's call a spade here too. Hampus Lindholm cannot seem to stay healthy any longer.
Yeah.
You just go into now a season thinking, what is going to be the next injury, or when is that knee or whatever going to resurface again, where he's going to be out for a significant period of time. So maybe the organization is also hedging its bets on, we could likely lose this guy, Hampus, again for a chunk of time in the season.
Yeah. And you really want somebody who can step in and knows what they're doing. We've got a lot of young guys on D these days, and that's great, but that means there's a lot of inexperience there. And at this point, Connor Clifton is an experienced veteran defenseman now. And that's incredibly valuable when you have a system that really emphasizes defense.
But does it lend yourself to giving you a lot of confidence when now we're saying Connor Clifton is a veteran defenseman, right? And we're going to be doing an episode focusing on our defensive core and our forward core groups heading into the season. And there's quite a bit to unpack when it comes to the Bruins, quote unquote, defensive depth at this point.
Yeah. I would suggest for new watchers of the game who have not seen the joys of Cliffy hockey, or even folks who don't remember, look for a player who is going to be throwing good hits.
And he doesn't rack up a lot of penalty minutes.
No.
So he knows, unlike other members of the Bruins defensive core, he knows how to hit someone legally.
Yes. And effectively. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I think what I'm expecting to see out of Connor Clifton is exactly like we said. We're going to see a high energy. We're going to see good physical play. We're going to see a player who has a strong ability to gap up and really assist in that zone exit. Hopefully them getting better with more of the correct personnel and getting more familiar with Sturm's system, really trying to create a team that thrives on transition. That's what he's ultimately trying to accomplish with this Bruins team. And I think that Connor Clifton is a good addition to make that happen.
And I am going to be curious to see his usage. And I'm going to be curious to see how that translates in terms of the defensive structure that they clearly want to play, and how that helps the goaltenders too. Let's face it. We relied way too much. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but we relied way too much on our goalies last season, more than I think even they might have anticipated or expected.
Swayman has played roughly the same number of games as other significant starters, but I guarantee you he had a lot more work to do in that amount of time.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And the last thing I did fail to mention, I fully expect to see him doing a lot of PK work. I don't know that I would necessarily call him a PK specialist, but he's definitely one that you want to have fully engaged and used a lot on the penalty kill. And that is, again, something else that for most of his time in Boston and most of what we've seen in the last 2 decades has been something that the Bruins have particularly excelled at, and in recent years have not done as well on the penalty kill. That was actually quite literally killing this team.
A little bit of regression.
I would expect to see a much improved penalty kill with Connor Clifton on that unit.
I think fans who are unfamiliar with Connor Clifton will likely enjoy seeing him play, because I myself love to see defensemen who are physical,
Oh,
right?
yes.
And do it within the realms of the rules, but I'm all for ensuring that whoever's coming in to our end of the house has to look over his shoulder to see what's coming at him.
Yes, exactly. Can't wait for Cliffy hockey.
Yeah, we'll see how that translates and how it surfaces in the upcoming season. So with that being said, folks, thank you for listening. Please make sure you like and subscribe for more content, and be sure to leave us a rating or a review to help other Bruins fans find us. You can also support our podcast by joining our Patreon or following us on our socials at Tape to Tape MK and on Substack at tape2tapemk.substack.com. Any closing thoughts?
Go Bees!
Go Bees!